Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Sleepy Scholar. Tonight, we are going somewhere very far away and somewhere very close at the same time. 400 kilometers above your head, right now, there is a small metal home drifting through the dark, moving so fast that it circles the entire Earth every 90 minutes. Inside it, a handful of people are living a life stranger than almost any life that has ever been lived. Tonight, we will visit them gently, not to be alarmed by their world, but to feel quietly how strange and fragile and human it is to leave the ground at all. You may have had a long day. Your body may be tired in that specific way that makes deep thoughts feel like too much effort, and cosmic mysteries feel like too much wonder to hold. That's all right. You don't need to hold anything tonight. You don't need to follow every word or remember a single fact by morning. You can let your mind rest in the shallow end of the story or drift far out into sleep. And either way, this will have worked exactly as it should. We're not in any hurry. There is nowhere else you need to be tonight, and nothing here that requires your full attention. We'll wander gently through the quiet, difficult, oddly tender reality of living off the earth, the way you might wander through a house at night with the lights low, just looking, just noticing, not needing to understand everything you pass. If these gentle journeys ever help you find your way to sleep, you're welcome to like or subscribe, only if it feels easy. It simply helps other sleepy souls find their way here too, to this same quiet corner of the internet, on nights when their own minds won't slow down either. Now, before we go anywhere at all, let's take care of your body. Let your shoulders soften just a little away from your ears. You don't have to force it. Just notice them and let them fall. Let your jaw unclench. Let your tongue rest heavy at the bottom of your mouth. Let your forehead smooth out the way it does right before sleep, when there's nothing left to think hard about. Let your breathing slow down, not by trying, just by allowing. In gently, out slowly. There's no correct way to breathe right now. There's just your way tonight. You don't need to remember anything I say. You don't need to follow the thread if it slips away from you. Nothing here is a test, and nothing here is waiting for the right answer. You are allowed to drift in and out as much as you like. You are allowed to fall asleep in the middle of a sentence and miss the rest entirely. That is not failure. That is the whole point. So let your mind loosen, the way a held breath loosens when it's finally let go. Let your body sink a little further into whatever is holding you right now, the bed, the chair, the dark. And now, let's begin to wander 400 kilometers up into a life built entirely without ground beneath it. Up there, gravity does not disappear. Not really. It's still pulling, almost as strongly as it pulls on you right now. What's different is that the station and everyone in it are falling together endlessly, missing the earth over and over as they go. And that falling feels, from the inside, like floating. Your body was built over hundreds of millions of years to know which way is down. Your bones were built to carry weight. Your muscles were built to push against something solid. Up there, none of that old knowledge applies anymore, and the body begins, slowly and without any drama, to forget. Right now, your own skeleton is quietly doing its ancient job, bearing your weight every time you stand, every time you walk to the kitchen or shift in your sleep. You've never had to ask it to. It has simply always known how. But that is only one small part of the story. Bone is not the dead, stony material it looks like. It's alive, constantly rebuilding itself, laying down new material where it's needed and quietly clearing away what isn't. And what tells it where it's needed, more than almost anything else, is weight. The pull of gravity, the tug of your own mass against the floor. Take that pull away, and the body's builders slow down while its demolition crews keep working at their normal pace. Without serious, deliberate effort, an astronaut can lose close to 1% of their bone density for every month spent in orbit. A month is a small stretch of time down here. Up there, it can quietly cost a small piece of the very frame that holds a person together. It happens unevenly, too, settling heaviest in the hips and lower spine, the very bones that once did the hardest work of standing and walking. The body, in its own way, is simply being economical. It stops investing in strength it no longer seems to need. You will never lose bone this way. Your own skeleton is being gently reinforced every single day, just by the ordinary business of standing, walking, existing under the sky. There is something quietly reassuring in that. The earth itself is holding you together, a little every single day, without either of you ever noticing. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. The heart is a muscle, and like every other muscle in the body, it has spent your entire life working against gravity. It pumps blood upward against the pull of the earth every single time it beats, and over the years, it has grown strong doing exactly that. In orbit, that particular job disappears. Blood no longer needs to be pushed uphill because there is no uphill anymore. Fluid settles wherever it wants to, and a muscle that no longer needs its old strength begins, very quietly, to let some of it go. Astronauts' hearts have been found to become slightly smaller and more spherical during long stays in space, more round, less like the elongated shape it holds on the ground. It isn't damaged so much as it is unlearning, adjusting itself to a world where lifting fluid upward is no longer part of the job. The same happens to the muscles in the legs and back, the ones that once held a person upright against a constant, invisible weight. Without serious resistance exercise, done almost every single day, those muscles begin to soften and shrink with startling speed, faster than muscle loss from almost any illness or bed rest down here on Earth. Every quiet effort your legs make tonight, holding you up earlier today, walking you from one room to another, was a kind of exercise your body did without asking your permission. There is no such thing as accidental exercise in orbit. Up there, every ounce of strength has to be earned again and again, deliberately, or it simply leaves. But that is only one part of a much larger unraveling. Without that daily pull of weight, fluid inside the body no longer knows to settle downward into the legs and feet the way it does here. Instead, in the first hours of arriving in orbit, blood and other fluids shift upward toward the head and chest, pooling in places they were never meant to sit for long. The face swells. Astronauts describe waking in the first days looking almost unrecognizable, puffy, rounded, their features blurred by fluid gathering just beneath the skin. Meanwhile, the legs grow thinner, almost delicate, earning the nickname among crews of chicken legs. A strange and slightly funny detail tucked inside something much more serious. That fluid shift brings pressure with it, a persistent, dull headache in the first days that some describe as feeling like hanging upside down for hours without relief. And for some astronauts, the pressure settles somewhere far more delicate, behind the eyes, gently flattening the back of the eyeball and swelling the optic nerve, a condition now known to sometimes leave a lasting mark on vision that doesn't fully reverse once they return home. Your own eyes, resting now, are held in careful balance by the same gravity that once seemed like nothing at all. An invisible, patient hand keeping fluid where it belongs, hour after hour, without your body ever needing to think about it. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, something that comes not from the body's own confusion, but from the emptiness just outside the walls. Down here, you are wrapped in a thick, invisible blanket of atmosphere, tens of kilometers of air pressing down and around you, quietly absorbing most of the high-speed particles that constantly rain down from space. You have never had to think about this protection. It has simply always been there, doing its work in silence. In low orbit, that blanket thins dramatically. Astronauts sit above the vast majority of that shielding, exposed to a steady drizzle of cosmic radiation, tiny, fast-moving particles from distant stars and the sun itself, passing through the station's thin walls, and sometimes straight through a sleeping astronaut's body. Some crew members have described seeing faint flashes of light with their eyes closed in the dark. A strange, private fireworks show caused by these particles passing directly through the tissue of the eye. It's a gentle, almost otherworldly sounding detail, and also a quiet reminder of just how exposed a body becomes once it leaves that thick blue blanket behind. Over months, that steady exposure adds up to a meaningfully higher lifetime risk of certain cancers. One of the reasons mission lengths are so carefully measured and limited. It isn't a single dramatic event. It's more like standing very slightly closer to a fire than is comfortable for a very long time. Right now, held safely under that same blue blanket of sky, your body is being quietly shielded from nearly all of that. It's one more small, ancient kindness the earth performs for you every hour of every day that you have never had to ask for. But this is only one thread in a much longer, quieter story. There's a strange, less discussed kind of ache that some astronauts describe developing after weeks in orbit, deep and internal rather than muscular. A heightened risk of kidney stones. On Earth, calcium leached from bone is filtered out steadily through urine in a slow and manageable rhythm. In orbit, with bone breaking down faster and fluid balance thrown into disarray, that same calcium sometimes concentrates into hard, sharp crystals in the kidneys, a genuinely painful condition to develop hundreds of kilometers from the nearest hospital. Add to this a body that, without gravity's steady pull compressing it, quietly stretches. Astronauts often grow slightly taller in orbit, sometimes by several centimeters, as the spine's cushioning discs expand and lengthen without the daily weight pressing them back down. It sounds almost pleasant, a small, unexpected gift of height. But that same lengthening frequently brings with it a persistent, aching lower back pain in the first weeks, the spine adjusting to a shape it was never quite built to hold for long. And quietly, beneath all of this, the immune system itself seems to drift out of its usual rhythm. Dormant viruses that a body normally keeps perfectly controlled, chickenpox, cold sores, can reactivate faintly under the combined weight of stress, isolation, and microgravity. A small, uncomfortable reminder that even the body's invisible defenses are shaped by gravity's steady hand more than anyone once assumed. Your spine right now is exactly the length it's supposed to be for you, held in its familiar shape by the same quiet, ceaseless pressure that has surrounded you since before you can remember. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, something small enough to almost miss entirely. In the very first hours after reaching orbit, before the body has settled into anything resembling a routine, a large share of astronauts experience something doctors call space adaptation syndrome, a wave of nausea and disorientation caused by the inner ear suddenly losing its most trusted sense of up and down. The tiny fluid-filled canals that once reliably reported which way was down are now receiving no clear signal at all. And the confusion that follows can feel, by several accounts, remarkably close to a bad case of seasickness. It usually passes within a few days, as the brain quietly rewrites its own expectations and begins trusting sight over balance instead. But those first days are, by nearly universal agreement, some of the most miserable of the entire mission. A strange, private illness that has nothing to do with anything an astronaut ate or caught, only with a body trying urgently to relearn which way is which. Your own inner ear right now is quietly certain of exactly which way is down. A small, unthanked certainty that most people never once think to appreciate until it's taken away. There's something else worth resting on for a moment, softer and stranger still. Feet, it turns out, change in orbit in a way almost no one expects. Without ever touching a solid floor with real weight behind each step, the thick, toughened skin on the soles of an astronaut's feet, built up over a lifetime of walking, slowly begins to soften and peel away, sometimes coming off in small sheets during a routine sock change. Meanwhile, the tops of the feet, used constantly to hook into foot restraints while floating and working, grow their own new patches of toughened skin instead, in a place feet were never calloused before. It's a small, strange kind of trade, the body reshaping its own toughness to match an entirely new set of daily demands. Nothing about it is dangerous, but astronauts have described it as one of the odder, more visceral reminders that the body up there is being rebuilt, quietly and specifically, for a life it was never originally designed to live. Whatever ground your own feet touched today, warm or cool, solid or soft, was doing the same ancient job it's always done, without your body needing to invent a single new way to cope with it. But there is a second kind of weight lost in orbit, one that has nothing to do with muscle or bone at all. Close your eyes for a moment, if they aren't already. Notice everything reaching you right now that isn't language. A draft of air, maybe. Some far-off, ordinary sound outside. The particular texture of the air on your skin, whether it's warm or cool, dry or a little damp. None of that exists on the space station. There is no wind, because there is no weather, because there is no sky in the way you know it. There is no rain, no changing temperature drifting in through an open window, no scent of rain on pavement or grass after sun. The air is the same manufactured air, hour after hour, day after day, endlessly filtered and reused, carrying no season, no memory of outside. It's a strange kind of sensory silence that most people never experience even once in an ordinary life. No natural smell at all anywhere, for months at a time. Astronauts have described craving, almost desperately, the smell of dirt after rain, or fresh-cut grass, small things the nose down here never even registers as a gift. Every breath you take tonight is carrying some trace of a living world outside you, whether you can name it or not. That's a kind of richness the ISS simply cannot offer, no matter how advanced its systems become. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. The station itself is not small, exactly. Pressurized modules add up to roughly the interior space of a large 6-bedroom house. But unlike a house, there is no leaving it, no walk outside for air, no drive to see another face, no changing of scenery beyond floating from one module to the next. For 6 months at a time, sometimes longer, a crew of 6 or 7 people share that same enclosed volume, working, sleeping, eating, and troubleshooting emergencies together, with no possibility of physical distance beyond a few dozen meters in any direction. Even the most easygoing relationships, astronauts have said, eventually need small rituals of privacy just to survive the closeness. Headphones, a curled sleeping bag zipped shut, a deliberately averted gaze. Psychologists who study isolation compare it, in some ways, to long submarine deployments or polar winters, environments where a small group must function as each other's entire social world for months, with no fresh face, no new voice ever arriving to break the pattern. Tonight, even in the quietest room, you exist inside a world that stretches out infinitely past your walls, full of other lives continuing at every distance. That's a kind of spaciousness the body registers even when the mind isn't thinking about it directly. But that is only one small part of the story. Your body right now still runs on a rhythm laid down over hundreds of millions of years of evolution. Light rising and falling once, roughly every 24 hours, telling every cell inside you when to wake and when to rest. The space station orbits Earth so quickly that its crew experiences a sunrise or sunset roughly every 45 minutes. 16 full cycles of light and dark in a single 24-hour period. The sky outside the window offers no consistent cue at all about when it's supposed to be night. To cope, crews rely entirely on artificial schedules, tightly structured clocks, and shaded windows, forcing an approximation of Earth's rhythm onto a body surrounded by 16 false days. Even with careful planning, many astronauts report chronic, low-grade sleep disruption for the entire length of their mission. A tiredness that never quite lifts because the environment itself keeps quietly working against rest. There's a kind of comfort in knowing your own body is a prediction machine, gently guessing, moment to moment, what's likely to come next based on patterns it has learned. Right now, the falling dark outside your own window, real or gently imagined, is one of the oldest, most trustworthy patterns it knows. and it is allowed to lean into that pattern completely tonight. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. Silence, in the way you might imagine it, does not exist aboard the station either. Life support systems require constant airflow, constant filtration, and that means constant machinery. Fans circulating air through every module, pumps moving water and coolant, computers processing day and night. All of it hums. Astronauts have described the background noise as somewhere between a rushing river and a low, mechanical roar, loud enough that many wear earplugs simply to sleep, and loud enough over long missions that some have reported measurable hearing changes by the end of their stay. It's a strange kind of exhaustion, being tired not from silence, but from the absence of it, never once experiencing true, natural quiet for months on end. If it's quiet around you right now, even faintly, let that be something to rest inside rather than something to notice and move past. A true, natural quiet is rarer and gentler than it often gets credit for. But that is only one part of a much larger unraveling. There's another strange side of that same equation, less about the noise itself and more about the mind's need to compensate for it. In a station without seasons, without new faces, without any change to the visual landscape beyond the same handful of gray and white modules, monotony becomes its own peculiar strain. Days blur into each other. The same 11 modules, the same 6 colleagues, the same fixed set of tasks, cycling with almost no variation for half a year at a stretch. Psychologists have a name for the particular fatigue this creates, sometimes called the third quarter phenomenon, a documented dip in mood and motivation that tends to appear once a long mission passes its halfway point, well after the initial excitement fades, and well before the relief of return begins to feel close. It shows up in submarine crews and polar researchers too. Anywhere a small group is sealed away together for a fixed, distant stretch of time, and communication with home carries its own strange lag and distance. A message to family isn't instant. Depending on the station's position, there can be delays, spotty connections, entire stretches without any live conversation at all. Only recorded messages passed back and forth like letters. Astronauts have spoken of missing ordinary things most intensely. A birthday they can't attend even by phone. A child's voice heard only through a delayed and slightly grainy video call. Whatever ordinary comfort you have access to tonight, an easy phone call, a shared room, a familiar voice nearby, is something the loneliest kind of distance simply cannot offer. And it's worth letting that comfort sit with you for just a moment longer than usual. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. A quieter kind of protection than the one we spoke of earlier. Because the thin walls of the station offer only limited shielding from radiation, engineers designed a specific place of retreat for the rare, more dangerous moments. A solar storm capable of throwing out a genuinely intense burst of particles. During these events, crew members gather in the most heavily shielded section of the station, often surrounded by stored water and supplies. Since plain water turns out to be remarkably effective at blocking radiation, far better in some ways than metal. It means that on the worst days, safety looks less like advanced technology and more like huddling behind large tanks of drinking water, waiting quietly for a storm from the sun to pass. There's something almost old-fashioned about it, sheltering behind the most basic of resources, water and distance, against something as vast and modern sounding as a solar storm. Tonight, no storm from the sun is reaching you at all, filtered out entirely, long before it ever touches your skin, by the same atmosphere that has sheltered every creature that has ever lived here. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one is about researchers who never left the ground at all. Because true isolation studies are hard to run safely in actual orbit. Scientists have built entire simulated space missions here on Earth, sealed habitats where small crews live in strict isolation for months at a time, monitored closely for exactly the same psychological patterns astronauts experience above. Some of these experiments have lasted well over a year. Volunteers agreeing to be closed away from the ordinary world entirely, just to help researchers understand how a mind holds together, or quietly phrase, under that particular kind of distance. What they've found again and again is remarkably consistent. Mood dips at predictable points. Small conflicts spike and fade in recognizable patterns. And the simple presence of a private space, even a curtain, even a single small drawer that belongs to no one else, meaningfully protects a person's sense of self over the long months. It turns out that almost nothing matters more to a confined mind than a small, respected boundary of its own. Whatever small, private corner belongs only to you tonight. A chair, a side of the bed, a particular spot by a window, is doing quiet, important work for your own mind. The same work researchers have spent years confirming matters more than almost anything else. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, small and easy to miss, because natural daylight never truly reaches the station's interior in any steady, reliable way. Engineers eventually installed special lighting systems designed to mimic the shifting color of a natural day, cooler and bluer in the station's simulated morning, warmer and dimmer as its simulated evening approaches. It's an artificial sunrise and sunset, built entirely from adjustable LED panels, offered to a body that would otherwise have no reliable daily rhythm to hold onto at all. It doesn't fully replace the real thing, astronauts say, but it helps, nudging tired, confused circadian rhythms a little closer to something livable. It's a strange kind of tenderness, built by engineers who understood that survival up there required looking after not just the astronauts' lungs and muscles, but the quiet, steady rhythm of their inner clocks as well. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, gentler still. The station itself makes small sounds no one quite expects, soft creaks and faint groans as its metal panels expand and contract, warming rapidly in direct sunlight and cooling again just as quickly the moment it passes into Earth's shadow, 16 times every day. Astronauts have described it almost like the settling of an old wooden house. At night, small, harmless sounds that nonetheless take real time to stop noticing. Alongside the mechanical hum we spoke of earlier, this adds one more unfamiliar texture to the soundscape of an already strange home. One more thing the mind has to learn to file away as ordinary before it can properly rest. Whatever quiet, familiar creaks exist in your own walls tonight, already long since filed away by your mind as nothing at all to worry about, are a kind of comfort in themselves. Sounds so known they've become almost invisible. There is something else worth pausing on, something gentler and stranger than the rest. Astronauts who spend real time looking down at the Earth from orbit, rather than out into the black distance of space, frequently describe a sudden and overwhelming emotional shift, now studied closely enough to have its own name. The overview effect, seeing the whole planet at once, borderless, fragile-looking, wrapped in a startlingly thin ribbon of atmosphere, seems to produce a lasting sense of unity and perspective that many say never fully fades, even decades later. It's one of the only entirely good things this strange, taxing environment reliably gives back. Difficulty and wonder, it turns out, are not opposites up there. They sit right beside each other. The same window that reveals a suffocatingly small, hard life also reveals, a few feet away, the whole blue earth turning quietly beneath them. Above you tonight, whether you can see it through a window or only imagine it, that same earth is still turning, calm and steady, exactly as it has for billions of years, and exactly as it will continue long after tonight, long after every worry currently sitting in your chest has long since dissolved into something too small to remember. That is enough time spent on the mind's quiet strain for now. There's a very different, more physical kind of hardship waiting for us, one measured not in emotion, but in the plain, stubborn logistics of simply living somewhere that offers nothing for free. There is no shower on the International Space Station. Not one. Water in microgravity refuses to fall or drain the way it does here. Instead, it clings, forms wobbling spheres, and drifts wherever the air currents push it, which makes a normal shower not just impractical, but genuinely dangerous. Since stray water droplets can find their way into electronics, or worse, into the astronaut's own airways. Instead, astronauts wash with a modest ration of water squeezed from a pouch, a washcloth, and rinseless soap and shampoo that require no rinsing at all, simply wiped away with a towel afterward. It is functional, efficient, and by every account from those who have lived it, deeply unsatisfying. Nothing at all like the simple, complete comfort of standing under running water. Tonight, if you have access to warm, running water whenever you like, that is a small luxury worth noticing. One so ordinary down here that it rarely earns a single grateful thought. But that is only one small part of the story. Water on the station is treated as one of its most precious resources because almost none of it is wasted and very little of it is new. The station's water recovery system captures, filters, and purifies nearly every drop of moisture the crew produces. Sweat evaporated into the cabin air, breath condensed out of the humidity, and yes, urine as well, all passed through a multi-stage purification process until it becomes water clean enough to drink again. NASA engineers have a fond, slightly wry phrase for the system. Today's coffee is tomorrow's coffee. An entire closed loop of water, endlessly reused, rather than ever truly discarded. It sounds unsettling on first hearing, and most astronauts admit they needed a little time to adjust to the idea. But by every measurable standard, the water that emerges is cleaner than most tap water found anywhere on Earth. It's a strange, quiet kind of resourcefulness. This refusal to waste anything at all in an environment with nothing extra to spare. And there's something almost moving in imagining a small crew, hundreds of kilometers up, drinking water that has been part of their own bodies again and again, in an endless, careful, gentle cycle. There's something else worth resting on for a moment. Without gravity to pull things downward, mess in microgravity behaves in an entirely different, far more troublesome way than mess on Earth. Crumbs from food don't fall to a table or floor to be swept away. They drift indefinitely through the cabin air, along with loose hair, flakes of skin, and any other small particle that escapes a careful hand. This isn't just an annoyance. Loose particles floating freely can drift directly into an astronaut's eye, causing genuine irritation, and at times, real difficulty completing delicate tasks. Worse, they can be drawn into the station's air filtration vents, where an accumulation of debris can clog systems that the entire crew depends on for breathable air. Because of this, cleaning is a serious, scheduled, weekly responsibility on the station, involving vacuums and wipe downs of every surface, not a casual chore, but a genuine safety procedure. Even something as small as a stray crumb up there carries a kind of quiet consequence it would never carry down here. If a small mess sits somewhere in your own space right now, unattended, harmless, easily ignored until tomorrow, let that ordinary, low-stakes untidiness be a small comfort rather than a source of guilt. Down here, mess mostly just waits patiently. It doesn't drift into anyone's eyes, but that is only one part of a much larger unraveling, because muscle and bone begin fading almost immediately in microgravity. Exercise aboard the station isn't optional or occasional, the way it might be down here. It's a mandatory, non-negotiable part of every single day. Roughly 2 hours set aside for it, no matter how busy the schedule otherwise is. Astronauts run on treadmills while strapped down with a harness and bungee cords, since without gravity, there's nothing to keep their feet in contact with the belt at all. They ride stationary bikes with no seat, since a seat serves no purpose when there's no weight pressing down into it. And they use a specialized resistance machine, essentially a system of vacuum cylinders that simulates the pull of weightlifting without any actual weights, since ordinary weights would simply float uselessly in the module alongside everything else. Skipping even a few days of this routine can mean measurably faster muscle and bone loss. So the exercise isn't treated as self-improvement in the way it might be on Earth. It's closer to essential maintenance, as necessary and unskippable as breathing, keeping a body from unraveling in an environment actively working to take it apart. Every ordinary walk you've taken today, every set of stairs, every small unconscious effort your muscles made without being asked, was quietly doing work that up there requires 2 dedicated, deliberate hours every single day, without exception. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, something smaller, stranger, and a little bit funny in its own careful way. Food in orbit has to follow rules shaped entirely by the absence of gravity. Nothing can be crumbly, or it becomes floating debris. Nothing can be loose, or it drifts away mid-bite. Bread, in its ordinary form, was banned from the station early on for exactly this reason, replaced almost entirely by tortillas, which hold sandwich fillings together without shedding a single crumb into the air. Meals mostly arrive dehydrated or thermally stabilized, rehydrated with hot or cold water directly from a dispenser, then eaten straight from the pouch with a fork. or sometimes just squeezed directly into the mouth. And more strangely still, many astronauts report a genuine, measurable dulling of taste in orbit, a side effect of that same upward fluid shift causing mild congestion, not unlike having a permanent, faint head cold. Spicy food and strong flavors like hot sauce and shrimp cocktail become unusually popular on the station, requested again and again, simply because they're some of the only things that still taste like anything at all. The next ordinary meal you eat, whatever it is, will arrive at your tongue with its full, unclouded flavor, a small, complete pleasure that up there takes real effort just to taste it all. But that is only one small part of the story. Sleep itself requires its own strange workaround. Without gravity, there's no natural resting position at all. A body left alone will simply drift, limbs floating gently outward, arms sometimes rising slowly in front of the sleeper, like a sleepwalker reaching for something unseen. Astronauts sleep zipped into a sleeping bag that is itself strapped firmly to a wall inside a small personal crew cabin, roughly the size of a phone booth, just large enough for the bag, a laptop, and a few personal items. Strapping down isn't a preference. It's the only way to keep a sleeping body from bumping gently into walls or equipment throughout the night. Some astronauts report sleeping remarkably well once they adjust, oddly soothed by the complete absence of pressure points. No hip or shoulder pressed uncomfortably into a mattress the way it might be down here. Others report the opposite, an unshakable instinct that something is wrong. The body's old, deep expectation of solid ground beneath it quietly unmet, night after night. Tonight, wherever you are resting, gravity is holding you gently against whatever surface is beneath you. A soft, constant, reassuring pressure keeping you anchored exactly where you are, without you ever needing to strap yourself down to stay there. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, something a little heavier than the rest. The station itself is, in a very real sense, a fragile machine holding 6 or 7 people alive inside a vacuum that would kill them within seconds if it ever truly failed. Every system, air, water, temperature, pressure, exists because complex machinery is actively, continuously working to maintain it. And every one of those systems can, in principle, fail. A depressurization event, even a small one, a tiny puncture from space debris, could mean a rapid, dangerous loss of the air the crew depends on. And stations maintain strict emergency protocols and even a docked escape capsule at all times, specifically because this risk is taken with total seriousness. Fire is treated with similar gravity, since smoke in a sealed, recycled air environment has nowhere at all to go. And a toxic chemical leak from onboard systems carries the same unforgiving weight. an emergency with no open window, no door outside, no possibility of simply stepping out into fresh air to escape it. Because of this, crews drill constantly for exactly these scenarios, memorizing precise, practiced responses to disasters most of them will hopefully never actually face, living every day with a background awareness that most people on Earth never need to carry at all. The awareness that the very air around them exists only because a machine is successfully doing its job, moment to moment, without pause. Tonight, the air moving in and out of your own lungs asks nothing at all of any machine. It's simply there freely, the way it always has been, without conditions, without maintenance schedules, without anyone needing to hold their breath and hope a system holds together. But that is only one part of a much larger unraveling, and this next piece is a smaller, softer kind of strange. Before any of this begins, astronauts spend a mandatory period in strict quarantine in the days leading up to launch, isolated deliberately from crowds, from sick children, from anything that might carry even a minor cold onto the station. A common illness that would be a mild inconvenience down here could spread rapidly and uncontrollably through a sealed crew hundreds of kilometers from the nearest doctor. So even a simple sniffle is treated in the final days before launch with genuine seriousness. That means astronauts often say goodbye to their families through glass or from a careful distance in those final days. An oddly formal, quietly heartbreaking ritual before an already enormous departure. Some have described it as the loneliest part of the entire mission, stranger even than the isolation of space itself, because it happens while their loved ones are still standing right there, just out of reach. If you were able to hug someone today, however briefly, however ordinary it felt in the moment, that was a freedom the final days before launch simply don't allow. And it's worth letting that small memory settle for a moment before we move on. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one belongs to the body's long, slow return rather than its time away. Coming home is its own strange ordeal, arguably harder in some ways than leaving. After months of the body quietly unlearning how to stand, how to balance, how to carry its own weight, gravity's sudden return can feel almost violent by comparison. Astronauts often cannot stand unassisted in the first hours after landing, their inner ear thoroughly confused about which way is up, their blood pressure dropping alarmingly the moment they try to sit upright, after months of fluid sitting differently in the body. Many describe a dizzying, nauseated sensation lasting days, as though the whole world has become subtly unstable, tilting and swaying even while perfectly still. Full physical readaptation especially for bone density, can take many months, sometimes longer than the mission itself lasted, the body needing far more time to remember gravity than it needed to forget it. There's something quietly moving in that asymmetry. How quickly the body lets old certainties go, and how patiently, stubbornly long it takes to rebuild them again. Tonight, your own body isn't relearning anything. It already knows exactly how to exist here, effortlessly, the way it always has. There's something else worth resting on for a moment, something small and specific and easy to overlook. Even something as ordinary as brushing teeth becomes a small, deliberate puzzle. Astronauts use toothpaste and a brush much like anyone would, but there's no sink to spit into, no running water to rinse a mouth clean. Most simply swallow the toothpaste and residue, or spit carefully into a towel kept specifically for that purpose. A strange, tiny compromise made dozens of times over the course of every single mission. Clothes, too, are never washed at all, because water is too precious and washing machines simply don't exist up there. Instead, astronauts wear the same shirt or shorts for days at a stretch, far longer than would ever feel comfortable down here. And once an item is truly beyond wearing again, it isn't laundered, it's discarded entirely, packed into a departing cargo capsule that later burns up harmlessly in the atmosphere on its way back down. Whatever ordinary comfort exists in your own evening routine tonight, brushing your teeth at a sink, changing into clean, freshly washed clothes, is something so small it barely registers as a comfort at all. And yet, it's exactly the kind of thing that becomes precious the moment it's no longer simple to have. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. The toilet itself deserves a slower, gentler mention, because it solves an almost absurdly difficult problem with genuine, careful engineering. Without gravity, waste doesn't fall away from the body the way it does here. It has to be pulled away instead, using a carefully directed stream of air suction that guides everything into the correct receptacle. Astronauts train extensively, using a camera and a precisely marked practice toilet, simply to learn how to align themselves correctly before ever using the real one in orbit. Liquid waste feeds directly into the water recovery system we spoke of earlier, destined to become drinking water again. Solid waste is sealed, stored, and eventually disposed of the same way as old clothing, packed away to burn up harmlessly on re-entry. It's an unglamorous, rarely discussed part of station life, and also, in its own strange way, a small marvel. An entire bathroom redesigned from first principles, purely because gravity, the thing that makes bathrooms simple down here, isn't available to help at all. there is something else worth pausing on, a little further out from the station itself. Spacewalks carry their own particular, quiet weight of danger. Astronauts stepping entirely outside the station's protection, wrapped in nothing but a pressurized suit, tethered by a single line to keep from drifting away into open space forever. A suit puncture, however small, or a tether failure, however unlikely, would offer no second chances at all, no nearby shelter, no possibility of rescue in any meaningful time frame. Even routine spacewalks have produced genuine emergencies. Water leaking inside a helmet during one mission nearly caused an astronaut to lose consciousness before an emergency returned to the airlock. Since without gravity, water inside a helmet doesn't simply drip away. It can pool dangerously around the nose and mouth. Every spacewalk, no matter how carefully planned and rehearsed, carries this same quiet, ever-present acknowledgement that just beyond the suit's thin fabric lies a vacuum with absolutely no tolerance for even the smallest mistake. Whatever solid walls surround you tonight, however ordinary they seem, are doing something a spacewalking astronaut would recognize instantly and gratefully. Holding a breathable, survivable world close around you without a single tether required. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, quiet and carefully arranged. Because isolation and stress build so steadily over a long mission. Crews are given regular scheduled time to speak privately with mental health professionals on the ground, along with protected, private video calls with family, built directly into the daily timetable rather than left to whatever time happens to be left over. Flight surgeons and psychologists monitor mood and stress closely throughout the mission, watching for the same predictable dips researchers have identified again and again in isolation studies, ready to step in gently if the strain ever grows too heavy for one person to carry alone. It's a quiet kind of care built directly into the architecture of the mission itself, an acknowledgement that a mind, just as much as a body, needs deliberate maintenance to survive that much distance from home. Whatever support exists for you, close by or a phone call away, is worth remembering tonight as something real, something available, even if you don't happen to need it at this particular moment. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, small and quietly beautiful. For years, researchers aboard the station have grown small crops of vegetables, lettuce, radishes, tiny flowering plants, in specially designed growth chambers under careful artificial light. The science matters, testing how food might one day be grown on a much longer journey to Mars. But almost every account from the crew mentions something else entirely. How deeply comforting it is simply to watch something green unfurl and grow in an environment made otherwise of nothing but metal, plastic, and recycled air. Astronauts have described checking on the plants far more often than strictly necessary, drawn back again and again to the small, quiet miracle of new leaves in a place with no soil, no rain, no natural sunlight at all. One crew even celebrated, with real and visible joy, the very first flower ever to bloom in space, a small orange zinnia, tended carefully back to health after nearly failing. Whatever green, growing thing exists nearest to you right now, a plant on a windowsill, a tree outside in the dark, is doing the same quiet work of comfort that a single small flower once did for an entire crew hundreds of kilometers from any soil at all. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, because nothing extra can simply be picked up on the way home. The station depends entirely on a careful, ongoing rhythm of resupply spacecraft. Cargo vessels launched every few months carrying food, spare parts, science experiments, and fresh water. A delay in one of these launches, caused by weather, technical trouble, or any number of ordinary complications, can mean real, tightening shortages on board. Rationed meals, postponed repairs, careful recalculating of exactly how long existing supplies need to stretch. It's a strange kind of dependency. An entire home floating in orbit, relying completely on a fragile, unbroken chain of deliveries from a planet hundreds of kilometers below, with absolutely no possibility of an unplanned trip to the store. Down here, even in a difficult week, a nearby shop or a delivery arriving within days offers a kind of quiet security that a crew in orbit simply cannot take for granted, no matter how well their mission is planned. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, ordinary and easy to overlook. Even something as simple as drying off after washing takes real thought aboard the station, since ordinary towels, left damp, don't dry quickly at all in air that isn't stirred by the gentle convection gravity provides down here. Damp fabric can stay clammy for hours, sometimes developing a faint, musty smell if it isn't dried carefully near an air vent. Small annoyances like this rarely make it into official mission reports, but astronauts mention them often in interviews and personal journals. The tiny, unglamorous frictions of daily life that add up quietly over months. It's a good reminder that hardship in orbit isn't only made of dramatic risks and rare emergencies. Most of it is smaller than that. 1,000 tiny inconveniences, each barely worth mentioning alone, accumulating slowly into real and lasting fatigue. Whatever small, unremarkable comfort exists in your own evening tonight, a towel that dries properly, a room where air simply moves the way it always has, is easy to overlook precisely because it never asks for a single moment of your attention. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, a little tenser than most. Space, even in low orbit, is not truly empty. Tiny fragments of old satellites, spent rocket stages, and even flecks of paint travel at extraordinary speeds, fast enough that even something the size of a grain of sand can strike with the force of a small explosion. The station's windows and hull are built to withstand the smallest of these impacts, and its most exposed windows are protected by sturdy shutters, closed whenever they're not specifically needed for viewing or photography. On rare occasions, tracked debris large enough to pose a real threat requires the entire station to fire its thrusters and shift its orbit slightly, a slow, deliberate maneuver to avoid a collision entirely. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, the whole crew is briefed, and in especially uncertain moments, they've moved temporarily into their docked return capsule, ready to undock and come home immediately if the debris proves too dangerous to avoid. Whatever quiet, unthreatened stillness surrounds you tonight, with nothing at all hurtling silently toward you out of the dark, is a kind of safety so complete it rarely earns even a passing thought. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, quietly reflective. Because the crew is small and the isolation total, disagreements aboard the station cannot simply be walked away from the way they might be down here. There is no separate room down the street, no evening apart to cool off, only the same shared modules, the same handful of colleagues, for months at a stretch. Crews are trained extensively in conflict resolution before launch, taught specific techniques for addressing tension early and gently, before small irritations have any chance to harden into something larger. Most describe it as one of the underappreciated skills of the entire mission, learning to disagree carefully, kindly, and quickly, simply because there is nowhere at all for an unresolved conflict to go except deeper into an already small, shared space. Whatever space exists for you tonight, a walk around the block, a different room, a moment entirely alone if you need one, is a freedom worth remembering the next time a small disagreement feels larger than it needs to. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, warmer than the rest. Even so far from home, holidays still find their way aboard. Crews have celebrated birthdays with tortilla-based cakes, decorated as best they can manage, marked major holidays with small floating decorations pinned carefully to the walls, and called home whenever the connection allowed, just to hear familiar voices on an otherwise ordinary, distant day. One crew even shared a modest holiday meal together, taking a brief pause from an packed schedule simply to eat together, as something closer to a family than a team. It's a small, stubborn kind of insistence, carrying the ordinary rituals of home into the strangest possible setting, refusing to let even genuine distance erase the things that make a day feel like it matters. Whatever small ritual or celebration waits for you in the coming days, however ordinary it might seem, is a kind of privilege. A distant crew works hard, deliberately, just to approximate. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one turns toward the mind again, gently. Medical emergencies present one of the strangest, most quietly frightening aspects of station life, because meaningful help is, at absolute minimum, many hours away, and often considerably longer depending on the specific emergency and the station's current position relative to a landing site. A crew member with appendicitis, a severe allergic reaction, or a serious injury cannot simply be rushed to a hospital the way they could almost anywhere on Earth. Because of this, at least one crew member typically receives extensive medical training before launch, and the station is stocked with a surprisingly comprehensive medical kit, including equipment for minor surgery, all used under real-time guidance from doctors on the ground via video link. It's a strange, high-stakes kind of self-reliance. An entire crew trained to essentially care for themselves through nearly anything short of the most catastrophic emergencies. Down here, the nearest hospital is, for nearly everyone, no more than an ordinary drive away. That simple, easily overlooked closeness is a kind of safety net most people never think to feel grateful for, and it might be worth a small, quiet thought of thanks tonight. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, a tense one, handled with enormous care. Every arrival at the station, whether a crewed capsule or an unmanned cargo vessel, requires an extraordinarily precise approach. Two objects, each moving at roughly 28,000 kilometers an hour, gradually closing the distance between them until they meet and lock together with only centimeters of tolerance for error. Even with advanced automated systems guiding most of the process, a trained astronaut typically stands ready the entire time to take manual control if anything drifts even slightly off course. A misjudged approach at that speed, however small the margin, could mean real structural damage to the station itself, threatening the safety of everyone aboard. Because of this, docking days carry a distinct, focused tension throughout the entire crew, a held breath that doesn't fully release until the capsule is confirmed, locked firmly in place. Whatever ordinary arrival you're expecting in the coming days, a visitor, a package, a return home, will almost certainly not require anyone aboard to hold their breath, while two objects moving faster than a rifle bullet gently, carefully touch. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, heavier and more personal than most. The suit worn during a spacewalk is, in a real sense, its own small spacecraft, a pressurized shell providing air, temperature control, and protection from a vacuum that would otherwise be instantly fatal. Beneath it, astronauts wear a special garment woven through with thin tubes of circulating water. Since the suit alone cannot properly regulate temperature in an environment that swings between scorching heat in direct sunlight and bitter cold in shadow, sometimes within the very same spacewalk. Get the balance wrong, even slightly, and an astronaut can begin overheating dangerously inside their own suit. Sweat with nowhere at all to evaporate to inside a sealed, pressurized shell. It's a strange, private kind of vulnerability. An entire body's comfort and safety depending on tubes of circulating water working exactly as designed. Hundreds of kilometers from anyone who could step in and help. The air around you right now is quietly regulating your own temperature without any tubing at all required, warming or cooling you gently through nothing more than its own ordinary presence. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, small and a little uncomfortable, because astronauts' health is monitored so closely in orbit. Many wear small biomedical sensors directly against the skin for extended stretches, patches tracking heart rate, temperature, and other vital signs around the clock. Combined with limited washing and the same clothing worn repeatedly for days, some crew members develop mild skin irritation or rashes beneath these patches, an uncomfortable but rarely serious side effect of being so continuously, carefully watched. It's one more small tax paid by a body being kept alive and monitored in an environment with no margin for missed warning signs. A minor discomfort traded willingly for the deeper safety that constant monitoring provides. Whatever ordinary skin comfort you have tonight, free of tape, sensors, or unwashed fabric pressed against it for days, is a small kindness easy to take completely for granted. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, older and quieter than most. The station itself has been continuously occupied for more than 2 decades now, its oldest modules aging in ways engineers watch closely. Microscopic cracks in certain sections, occasional small, slow leaks of cabin air that require careful tracking and eventual patching. None of it so far has posed a genuine danger, but it adds a persistent background hum of vigilance to daily life, a home that requires constant, careful watching simply to keep functioning as it should. Astronauts have described an odd kind of trust required to live comfortably inside an aging structure like this, trusting that the people monitoring it from the ground and the systems built to catch problems early are doing their job well enough to let a mind rest at all. Whatever walls surround you tonight are very unlikely to require anyone anywhere to be quietly watching for cracks in them at this very moment. And that unremarkable sturdiness is its own small, steady comfort. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, softer than most. Cutting hair in microgravity requires its own small, careful ritual. A set of clippers attached directly to a vacuum hose, sucking away each cut strand the instant it's freed, before it has any chance to drift loose into the cabin air. Astronauts typically cut each other's hair this way, one crew member trusting another with scissors or clippers near their scalp. A small, oddly intimate act of care between people who might otherwise spend their whole day simply working side by side. It's one of the quieter ways isolation reshapes ordinary life, turning a task usually handled by a stranger at a salon into something closer to an act of friendship, born entirely out of necessity, floating together in a small metal room far from anyone else who could help. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, distant and quietly strange, without an atmosphere to scatter and soften starlight the way it does down here. Stars seen from the station's windows don't twinkle at all. They appear instead as small, hard, perfectly steady points of light, oddly still against the black, in a way astronauts often describe as beautiful but subtly unfamiliar, missing some small flickering warmth the sky has always carried down here without anyone noticing. That gentle twinkle you might associate with a starry night, if you can picture one now, is itself a small gift from the same atmosphere that filters out radiation and holds gravity's fluid steady in your body. It has been quietly softening the sky for you your entire life. One more small kindness that mostly goes unnoticed until it's simply gone. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one carries real weight. Watching events unfold on Earth from so far away carries its own particular ache. Astronauts have said, especially during moments of tragedy or crisis back home. Wildfires, storms, conflicts, watched only through delayed messages and brief video updates, with absolutely no ability to help, to check on loved ones directly, or even to fully process what's happening in real time. Some have described a strange, disorienting grief in this, mourning something from a distance so total that even a phone call can't fully close it. Whatever difficult news reaches you tonight, however far away it might feel, you at least carry the possibility of reaching toward it. A phone call, a visit, a hand held, possibilities entirely unavailable to someone circling the Earth from 400 kilometers up. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, small and strange, carried home on the suits themselves. Astronauts returning from a spacewalk often describe a distinct, metallic smell clinging faintly to their suits and equipment once they're back inside. something many compare to the smell of a welding torch, or hot metal, or spent fireworks. No one is entirely certain why, though the leading explanation involves high-energy particles interacting briefly with the suit's outer materials. Whatever the true cause, it has become one of the strange, small signatures of the vacuum itself, a smell that, in a sense, doesn't belong to any place at all, since nothing can technically smell of anything in a true vacuum. And yet crews consistently describe encountering it anyway, drifting in with them through the airlock. It's a small, eerie detail, the emptiness of space, leaving behind a scent that has no business existing at all, and yet somehow does. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one belongs to the machines quietly working hardest of all. Carbon dioxide, breathed out constantly by every person aboard, has to be actively scrubbed from the cabin air around the clock. Since, in a sealed environment, it would otherwise build up quickly to dangerous, suffocating levels. The systems responsible for this, banks of filters and chemical scrubbers cycling endlessly, are treated as some of the most safety-critical machinery on the entire station, monitored closely with backups built in specifically, because a failure here wouldn't announce itself with any drama at all. Only a slow, invisible, and potentially fatal thickening of the very air the crew depends on. It's a strange kind of vigilance, guarding against a danger with no smell, no sound, no visible warning sign whatsoever, trusting entirely in sensors and redundant systems to notice what human senses simply cannot. The air filling your own lungs right now needs no scrubber at all, refreshed constantly, and invisibly by forests and oceans doing quiet work you'll never need to personally monitor. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, quiet and reassuring in its own careful way. At all times, at least one spacecraft sits docked to the station, specifically as a lifeboat, fully fueled and ready, capable of carrying the entire crew safely back to Earth within hours, if a serious emergency ever demanded it. It's rarely spoken about directly in daily conversation, but every crew member knows exactly where it is, exactly how long it would take to reach it, and exactly what their role would be in the unlikely event they ever needed to. There's something quietly steadying in that, a carefully planned exit always waiting nearby, even in a place with so few exits available at all. It doesn't remove the difficulty of living there, but it does soften it, just slightly, knowing a way home always sits ready, fueled, and waiting, just a short float away. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, smaller and more personal. Storage space aboard the station is extremely limited, meaning each astronaut is typically permitted only a small, carefully weighed allowance of personal items, sometimes no more than a kilogram or two of belongings that aren't strictly required for the mission itself. A single photograph, a small trinket from a child, a worn, familiar object carried simply because it makes an unfamiliar place feel slightly less foreign. Many astronauts speak about these tiny allowances with real tenderness, describing how much weight, emotionally, a single small object can carry when it's one of the only pieces of an entire life allowed to come along. Down here, surrounded by drawers and shelves, and rooms full of ordinary belongings, it's easy to forget how rare that kind of abundance actually is. Whatever small, ordinary object sits nearest to you right now, one among many, unremarkable simply because there's no shortage of them, is a quiet kind of luxury a crew in orbit would recognize instantly. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, and this one is about the years long before launch ever happens. Becoming an astronaut typically requires many years, sometimes a full decade or more, of intensive training, language study, technical certification, wilderness survival courses, and long stretches spent away from home, even before a single day is spent in orbit. Crews are often international, meaning astronauts frequently train and eventually work together in a second or even third language, adding one more quiet layer of effort to every single conversation, every technical instruction, every small joke shared to ease the tension of a long shift. By the time a mission finally begins, years of separation from ordinary life have often already been spent in preparation for it. Birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays given over to training long before the difficulty of space itself even begins. Whatever ease exists in speaking your own first language tonight, in being understood immediately, without translation or extra effort, is a small comfort worth noticing. One many hardworking crews spend years learning to do without. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, quieter, harder to pin down. Some astronauts, particularly toward the later months of a long mission, describe a mild but persistent mental fogginess, a slight dulling of memory, and quick thinking that researchers still don't fully understand. It may come from disrupted sleep, from mild radiation exposure, from the low-grade stress of constant vigilance, or more likely, some combination of all three working quietly together. Crews compensate with careful checklists and extra redundancy built into every important task, trusting written procedure over memory whenever the stakes are high enough to matter. It's a subtle, almost invisible cost, one that rarely shows up as anything dramatic, just a small, persistent haze settled over thoughts that used to arrive more easily and more quickly. Whatever clarity your own mind carries tonight, however tired it feels, is still operating inside familiar gravity, familiar air, and a familiar rhythm of light and dark. Three quiet gifts that a distant crew can only approximate with great effort. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, private in a way that's easy to overlook. Because safety on the station depends on constant monitoring. Cameras and communication systems are present throughout most of its common areas, meaning true, complete privacy is rare, available mostly only inside each astronaut's small personal sleeping cabin. Even calls home are sometimes conducted, knowing a conversation could, in principle, be logged or overheard. A small but persistent awareness that shapes how freely a person speaks, even with the people they love most. It's a strange trade, safety bought partly at the cost of the small, unwatched privacy most people down here rarely think to value at all. Whatever ordinary, unmonitored moment you have tonight, entirely your own, seen and heard by no one, is a freedom worth resting inside for just a little longer. That is enough dwelling in difficulty for now. There is something gentler worth resting on before we begin to slow down completely. For all of this hardship, nearly every astronaut who has spent real time aboard the station describes something unexpected waiting alongside the difficulty. A strange, settled contentment that arrives once the body and mind finally adjust. Tasks that once required intense concentration become second nature. Floating, once disorienting, starts to feel closer to swimming, an oddly graceful, almost joyful way of moving through space that no environment on Earth can fully replicate. Many describe simply drifting near a window in their rare free moments, watching the Earth turn slowly beneath them in complete silence, an experience so quietly moving that several astronauts have said it changed, in some permanent way, how they understood their entire life afterward. Difficulty and wonder, once again, turning out to live right beside each other, closer than anyone might expect. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, warm and a little wistful. Ask almost any astronaut what they miss most, and the answers are rarely dramatic. Fresh fruit, crisp and cold, rather than the same handful of dehydrated pouches. The particular sound of rain against a window, a specific dish cooked by a specific person, a grandmother's recipe, a favorite neighborhood restaurant, something no space kitchen could ever quite recreate. It's the smallness of these cravings that tends to stay with people. Hearing what someone genuinely misses after months in the most technologically advanced home ever built, and finding it's almost always something achingly ordinary, something most people down here could have simply by opening a refrigerator. Whatever ordinary easily reached comfort exists in your own kitchen tonight, waiting there without any rocket required to bring it to you, is worth a small, quiet moment of appreciation. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, tender in its own particular way. Coming home changes more than just the body. Astronauts often describe a strange emotional readjustment as well, relearning how to be fully present with family and friends after months of relating to loved ones only through brief calls and delayed messages. Children have grown in their absence. Familiar routines at home have quietly shifted to fill the space they left. Re-entry, several have said, asks as much of the heart as it does of the legs and inner ear. Most describe it eventually settling, relationships finding their footing again, patiently, over weeks rather than instantly. But the adjustment is real. One more quiet cost paid for distance most people down here will never have to cross. Whatever ordinary closeness exists in your life tonight, uninterrupted, requiring no relearning at all, is a steadiness worth feeling grateful for, even briefly, before we let it rest. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, one of the smaller, more human details of all. Music plays an unusually important role aboard the station. Astronauts often keeping personal playlists for exercise, for sleep, for the long, quiet stretches of solo work between tasks. One astronaut famously recorded a music video from orbit, floating gently through the station's modules with a guitar. A small, strange, beautiful reminder that even in the strangest possible environment, people still reach instinctively for the same simple comforts they'd reach for anywhere else. Photography, too, becomes something close to a devotion for many crew members. Hours spent simply pointing cameras down at the turning Earth below, capturing storms, city lights, auroras rippling green and violet across the dark. Some have said it became the closest thing to a spiritual practice they'd ever experienced. A quiet, patient act of simply witnessing home from very far away. Whatever small comfort you reach for most naturally, whatever song or quiet ritual settles your own mind the way music and photography seem to settle theirs, is worth letting yourself have fully tonight, without needing any reason beyond the comfort itself. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. Quieter now. Aurora, seen from orbit, doesn't ripple upward from the ground the way it does from Earth. It unfolds sideways instead, beneath the station. A soft green and violet curtain glowing along the curve of the planet. Astronauts have described flying directly through the edge of one, watching it shimmer just beneath the window. Silent, entirely silent, no matter how vast it looks. There is something quietly humbling in that. A light so enormous it wraps around a piece of the whole planet, and somehow, up there, it makes no sound at all. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, softer still. At night, from orbit, entire coastlines reveal themselves in threads of gold light. Cities glow in patterns you'd never notice from the ground. Small clusters, long, branching lines, like veins traced across the dark. Astronauts have said it's strange, realizing how much of what feels like an entire life. Your street, your home, every place you've ever loved, looks from 400 kilometers up, like a single small point of light among countless others. It isn't a sad thought, most of them say, just a small one, a gentle resizing of things. Wherever you are resting right now is one of those small points of light too, just as real, just as quiet, held in the dark, the same as all the rest. There is something else worth resting on for a moment. This one almost the last. 16 sunrises a day sounds at first like chaos. But astronauts often describe something else entirely settling in over time. A strange, steady comfort in watching light return again and again, every 45 minutes without fail. No sunrise up there is ever late. None of them skip a turn. Maybe that's not so different from what a slow, steady breath can offer. In and then out, and then in again. Small, dependable returns, asked for nothing, given anyway. There is something else worth resting on for a moment, one of the last. Some astronauts have now spent well over a year continuously in orbit, longer stretches than almost anyone imagined possible when the station was first built. Each time a new record is set, it's treated less as a race and more as quiet, careful proof. Proof that a human body and mind, given the right support, can endure far longer away from the ground than anyone once assumed. It's a strange kind of achievement, measured not in speed or strength, but in simple, patient endurance, month after month, far from wind, far from rain, far from almost everything a body was built to expect. There's a quiet echo of that same endurance in you, too, tonight. However long today felt, however heavy this week has been, you're still here, still breathing, still capable of resting. That is its own kind of quiet achievement, even if no one is keeping record of it at all. We're getting close to the end of tonight's wandering now. Let's rest for a moment on the plainest, simplest comparison of all. Down here, on this ordinary, spinning planet, air is free. Water falls from the sky unasked. Gravity holds every one of your bones exactly where they need to be, without a single deliberate thought from you, hour after hour, for your entire life. None of that is available up there. Every breath, every drop of water, every hour of muscle and bone maintained has to be built, filtered, exercised, and maintained through relentless, deliberate engineering and effort. Space doesn't offer comfort freely. It has to be manufactured moment to moment by machines and people working together simply to to make ordinary survival possible. And still, people choose to go. Still, people spend months away from solid ground, from wind, from rain, from the simple, unearned safety of gravity's steady pull. Because something up there, the view, the challenge, the reaching towards something larger, is worth the difficulty to them. There is something quietly moving in that. Somewhere above you tonight, someone made that same choice and is living right now inside every strange difficulty we've gently wandered through this evening. You don't need to hold on to any of this now. You can let all of it soften into a kind of impression, a general shape rather than a list of facts. The bone, the fluid, the noise, the isolation, the 16 sunrises. None of it needs to stay sharp in your memory. You can let it blur, the way a room blurs right before sleep, all its edges dissolving gently into something softer. Let your body settle a little further now, into whatever is holding you. Let your breathing slow even more, quieter than before. Let your shoulders release whatever small tension might still be resting there. There's nothing left to do, and nowhere left to go tonight. Above you, whether you can see it or not, the sky is still there, patient and steady, exactly as it has been for billions of years, exactly as it will continue long after tonight. Somewhere within that sky, a small station full of people is circling this same quiet planet, falling gently around it again and again, missing the ground on purpose, drifting through the dark together. And here, on the ground, held by gravity's oldest, gentlest kindness, you don't need to drift anywhere at all. You are already exactly where you need to be. Let your breathing settle, slower now than it was even a few minutes ago. Let your body sink just a little further into whatever is holding you. There's nothing left to carry tonight. No facts, no details, only the soft, steady hum of your own breath and the quiet dark around you and the ground beneath you, patient and unmoving, exactly where it's always been. Your body already knows how to rest. Sleep well, and good